I unlocked the terrifying secrets of Pascagoula, and what I found still haunts me. I never should have opened that door. It started as a regular day, gray clouds hanging low, the smell of rain in the air, and the soft hum of my old fan filling the corners of my room. I was flipping through dusty books, looking for something interesting to read, when I stumbled across an odd-looking key. It was heavy, rusted, and adorned with strange symbols. Curiosity ignited a fire in my chest. I felt a chill, but I brushed it off. As I wandered through my house, I noticed how quiet it was. I paused at the door to my basement. The wooden door loomed over me, a guardian to whatever secrets lay below. I could sense a presence, something lurking in the shadows. Odd noises, like whispers carried through the chill, drifted into my ears. The air was thick with unease. I took a shaky breath, feeling the cold air nip at my skin that I turned the key. It fit perfectly. The door creaked open, and a musty scent washed over me, a mix of damp stone and forgotten memories, leaving my heart racing. I peered into the pitch-black abyss below. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling, swallowed by the darkness. Silence answered back, thick and suffocating. I steadied myself, cautiously stepping down. Each creak of the stairs echoed like a scream, sending shivers racing down my spine. The walls seemed to breathe around me, shifting shadows flickering just out of sight. I could feel eyes on my back, the hairs on my neck standing on end. Strange noises skittered in the corners of my mind, like rats inside the walls. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from deeper within the basement. My heart dropped. Something moved. Panic surged through me, my hands trembled, my throat closed up. What was down there, waiting for me? It could sense my fear. I could almost hear it whisper my name. I squinted into the shadows, feeling their weight, almost tangible. And then I saw it. A figure, barely visible, a silhouette shrouded in darkness, standing just beyond the flickering reach of my flashlight. My breath hitched. It didn't move, but I felt it watching, calculating. I stumbled back, tripping over the first step. The figure shifted. I bolted for the door, my heart pounding like thunder. But just as I reached for the doorknob, it slammed shut. I was trapped. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The air turned thicker, heavy with dread as I banged on the closed door, shouting for release. Let me out. Please. Each desperate thud felt like a hammer striking against the heartbeat of a living creature. A match lit in the darkest recess of my mind. I felt it stir back, the silence transforming into something almost sentient, whispering secrets I couldn't fathom. My flashlight flickered, the beam wavering in the oppressive darkness, illuminating nothing but the damp stone walls that seemed to close in around me. I pressed my back against the door, listening intently. The figure hadn't moved closer, but I could feel its gaze like icy fingers reaching for me. A low hum resonated in the depths, an almost melodic thrumming that vibrated through the floor, urging me onward into the abyss. Then, a creaking sound echoed through the room, coming from the left. I turned, confronting the darkness like a deer in headlights. A soft scratch followed by a whisper crawled toward me, gently spreading like poison. You shouldn't have come here, it breathed, voice layering over the stillness like smoke, its tang taste as bitter as ash. Fear shot through me like shards of glass. Who are you? I managed to stammer. The vulnerability of my voice danced mockingly in the air, floating toward the entity that lingered just beyond perception. A breath caught in my throat as the entity stepped into the meager light. It was not human, nor was it entirely of this world, a grotesque silhouette formed from shadows and nightmares, with eyes like gaping holes that consumed the light around them. My mouth went dry. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped. It was as though the air had been siphoned from my lungs, replaced by the stench of decay and despair. Another crash rang out, louder this time, making the earth beneath my feet shudder. "They're coming for you," it rasped, tilting its head to the side in a grotesque mimicking of curiosity. "Can you hear them?" Suddenly, the walls of the basement rumbled, and the shadows coalesced, swirling around me, pulling me in. I stumbled back again, trying to break free from the smothering grip of darkness. No longer confined to stillness, whispers converged, morphing into a sinister chant that reverberated in my skull. The very foundation of the house groaned as though awakening from a long slumber. "Get out! Get out now!" I finally screamed, hurling myself against the door, rattling the knob desperately. But still, it held firm, mocking me with its resilience. The entity leaned closer, its breath a chill against my cheek, a cruel smile stretching across its shadowy face. In that very moment, I felt it something slinking behind me, brushing against my shoulder like a cold gust. A rush of air sent me spinning, and I glimpsed another figure, this one skimming through the darkness, pale and thin like a spectre borrowed from some forgotten grave. It paused, craning its neck to meet my gaze, and I saw its mouth moving but heard only silence, thick with menace. A low, guttural growl erupted from the corner of the basement, vibrating the stones around me. "Join us," echoed a voice, entwining itself with my thoughts, sinking deep into my psyche and wrapping its tendrils around my sanity. I felt it compel me, urging me toward the unknown. "No!" I shouted, pride fueling my defiance as I spun back to the door, slamming my shoulder against it, desperate, frantic. Cracks ran spiderweb-like across the worn wood, but the door remained obstinately sealed. Then came a thud, another crash, closer this time, vibrating through the ground and terrorizing my senses. Through the fissures in the door, I saw them, bright eyes of a horde advancing, snarling and shrieking, the air thick with their primal hunger. In a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the rusty key from my pocket, frantically jamming it into the lock. The shadows groaned, shifting and writhing, and just as I felt the tumblers catch, a cold hand clamped down tightly over my wrist, pulling me back as the door began to give way. The last thing I heard was that haunting laughter, the sound of countless voices, slithering into my ears, just before the darkness swallowed me whole. The weightlessness of darkness enveloped me fully, and for a moment, it felt as if I had returned to the womb, safe yet utterly vulnerable. But the sensation flickered, replaced by a sharp chill that penetrated through my skin, rousing me from my daze. I awoke lying on the cold floor of what felt like an expansive chamber. The relentless echo of silence mocked me, hiding the true horrors lurking in the shadows. I pushed myself up slowly, every nerve in my body screaming in protest. My heart hammering wildly in my chest, I instantly realized the corridor I had fought to escape just seconds before was now replaced by a vast and cavernous expanse, illuminated only by the faintest shimmering light that danced across the walls like lost spirits. The stone around me bore an unnatural sheen, not quite wet yet slick, and I could almost swear the walls were breathing, expanding and contracting, alive in a grotesque, synchronized rhythm. As I stood, my flashlight, struggling for power, flickered sporadically. In those pitiful flashes, the shadows seemed to blossom into forms, grotesque figures lurking in the corners, darting just out of reach each time the light pulsed back into the void. Panic clawed its way up my throat. I turned around, the cold creeping back with every passing second. I had to know. I had to escape. Rushing toward the far wall, I pressed my hand against the cold stone, searching for an unseen exit. My fingers grazed something, a jagged edge, hidden in the dark, warm against the chill. It was a door, ancient and heavy, its wood warped and filled with the knots of history. The surface was carved with symbols, some writhing as if alive, pleading with me to seek a route back to the world above ground, but a memory tugged at my mind, an echo of the entity's words, "They're coming for you." I shook my head to dispel the thought, but as if in retribution for my defiance, a rumbling began deep within the obsidian pit behind me, growing louder, vibrating through the very marrow of my bones. It was a clamorous stampede of some unseen force that thrummed with primal energy. With renewed urgency, I threw my shoulder against the door, but it barely budged. Frustration seeped through my veins as I groped for the key that had brought me so much dread. My breath hitched as my hands sank into my pocket, pulling out nothing but fragments of lint and the faded remnants of hope. My heart sank, the key was gone, the din behind me escalated into a frenetic clamor, and in the pale light, I could see them vague shapes, eyes aglow, weaving and pressing against the walls, merging into one another like a tide of living shadow. An assembly of the damned, all of them crying out in silent agony, the twisted reflections of faces I once knew. And then they were upon me, spilling forth, not just from behind me but from the very stone that surrounded me, as if the ground itself had conspired against my flight. In the swirling chaos, I saw the pale figure that had drifted past me in the basement, now stalking toward me like death manifest. Its mouth moved, but no sound emerged, the shadows sucking down any semblance of a scream. The eyes that trailed me were not just specters of the past but something much older and darker, a collective hunger. Help me! I cried, the desperation fueling my words, hoping against hope to penetrate the void that separated us, and then, abruptly, there was silence, the kind that suffocates, thick and stifling. All at once, the pounding stopped, their movement ceased, and the weight of countless gazes bore down upon me. Those things, they were now solidified bodies weaving in and out of the darkness, lifting their arms, uniting as one grotesque symphony drawn closer amidst an impossible stillness. A dim light flickered overhead, and through the brief illumination, I noticed the symbols on the door pulsed with a heartbeat of their own, glowing brighter with each echoing breath that stilled my voice. The symbols etched into the wood appeared to writhe and twist, merging beneath my gaze into grotesque shapes that began to form familiar faces. Friends, relatives, those I had lost, now twisted in expressions of horror and longing. Join us, they whispered in unison, their words wrapping around me like a serpent, lovely yet menacing. As they reached out towards me, simultaneously with grasping hands from beyond the door, I felt the walls quaking, fissures opening, and a stark realization, I was no longer simply a lost soul. I became the vessel for something far more sinister. With a sudden horde clamoring at the door, a thick fog of dread cemented around me, and with one swift flickering light, the room shattered like glass, revealing an abyss of teeth and hunger waiting to swallow me whole. And then, impossibly, the door tore open, revealing a world of blinding light and chaos. From within, a singular figure stepped forward. My heart dropped as I recognized it was me. I froze, paralyzed by the sight of my own reflection stepping forth from the blinding light. It was an echo, a twisted mirage of myself that emerged clad in shadows, with a face warped, eyes burning like embers in a smoldering fire. My heart thudded a wild tempo, as if warning me about a truth I dared not confront. What have I become? I gasped, the words spilling from my lips as if in a desperate prayer. The doppelganger smiled a twisted, malevolent grin that expanded across its face, revealing teeth far too sharp and elongated, jagged like shards of shattered glass. More than you know, it murmured, its voice a haunting melody that sent chills racing down my spine. You opened the door, after all. You came seeking what lies beyond. Behind it, the gaping maw of the door pulsed violently, screaming with whispers of horror and unfulfilled desires. Tendrils of smoke coiled and twisted, creeping around my feet, as if urging me to take a step closer. Spectral silhouettes flickered in and out of existence, their mouths moving in a silent harmony of anguish, clawing at the edges of my sanity. Fear roared through me, mingled with a strange compulsion, a beckoning that felt both inviting and infinitely dangerous. My doppelganger extended a hand, its fingers curling like snakes ready to strike, as it spoke in the voice of those I once cherished, those I believed lost forever. Come with us. There's so much more to see. So much healing. So much power. The walls throbbed, the rhythmic pulsing syncing with the frantic beating of my heart. With the flickering rustle of shadows, I saw faces within the stone, swirling and merging into a tapestry of sorrow, despair, and, inexplicably, yearning. A childhood friend turned to me, their eyes filled with a potent mix of terror and affection, as though I held the key to their redemption. "Please, save us," they mouthed silently, overlapping with the contorted faces that lay within the doorway, all trapped in a prison of regret. The fog thickened, the voices multiplying like a chant, suffocating my thoughts and muddling my fears. Each cry for help synchronized with the relentless pounding behind me, an unknown force demanding my allegiance. No, I whispered fiercely, the word barely escaping my lips like a fragile reed against a storm. "I will not commit, not again." With purpose finding its roots deep in my gut, I surged forward, intent on escaping the reflection that threatened to consume me whole. I spun around toward the ancient door, praying it was still ajar, praying I still had a chance. But as I turned, the space collapsed, the swirling shadows coalesced into a sheet of darkness, as if the whole chamber itself wanted to swallow me back into the void. Through the din of chaos, something cold and clammy wrapped around my ankle, the living shadows escalating in a frenzy, pulling me down. The doppelganger didn't falter. Instead, it stepped forward, its outstretched hand curling into a fist, pulling the shadows tightly around me, constricting my very breath. "Join us," it crooned, and suddenly, I could feel his presence behind me, the amorphous warmth of countless spectral hands eager to draw me into their fold. "You're far too precious to leave. Return to the fold." No. I screamed, forcing every ounce of will, scrambling toward the door. I grasped the doorframe, the wood splintering under my desperate grip, but the shadows surged, threatening to claim me, an insatiable beast longing for fresh prey. The air crackled with a supernatural pressure, a weight of sorrow and hunger woven through. And just as I thought I might break free, a voice whispered from the depths, chilling my very soul. "You unlocked our secrets, and now you are ours forever." The ground trembled violently beneath me, and as I looked back, I saw countless reflections of my twisted self merging with the countless shadows. All at once, the door slammed shut, sealing the light out and thrusting me back into pitch-black despair. No longer able to tell which way was up or where I began, I felt the shadows intensify, an all-consuming embrace of darkness, pulling me deeper into their lair. Suddenly, amid the clamor, I heard a faint, familiar melody resonating in the air, beckoning me with the warmth of memories. As it grew louder, I realized with mounting horror that it mirrored the very song I had hummed as a child, threatening to unravel the final threads of my sanity. "Join us," the echo of my own voice sang, enveloped within a chorus of nightmares. "It's time to come home." And in that instant, an explosion of blinding light shattered through the darkness, a crack in reality itself. But against it, the shadows screamed, writhing in agony and ambition, and that is when I saw a face emerging from the blinding light, one I never expected to see again, a face I had fought so hard to forget. "Mama?" I whispered, with hope and terror pooling in the depths of my heart, as the shadows hissed and converged, threatening to obliterate everything I once held dear. And then, just as the figure reached toward me, the ground erupted, and the shadows roared louder than ever before, drowning out my thoughts with one final scream: "You can never escape." The darkness seemed to swell with an unholy life of its own, the fetid stench of despair mingling with the echoes of forgotten sorrows filling every corner of the chamber. As I tumbled backwards, the shadows writhed like serpents, their hissing voices a cacophony of pain and longing. Yet, through that darkness, through the anguished screams and the grasping hands, I was not alone. Not just my mother reached for me, countless others joined in the fray, shadows of the vacant faces I had lost littered with sorrow. "Save us." Their voices cried out as one, a mantra pulsing through the air like a sinister heartbeat. "You have the power." I scrambled to my feet, breath hitching in my throat, suspended within the thrilling terror that churned around me. I hesitated, torn between those grasping shadows and the light erupting from the figure of my mother. It felt like a portal to sanity amid the madness, yet part of me instinctively recoiled from the familiarity, from the childhood comfort that, just beyond the embrace of the shadows, could become my undoing. "Come home, my love." The voice spun seductive webbing around my thoughts, resonating with the nostalgic echo of safety I once felt in her arms. The figure grew clearer, and the emergence shook my core. I saw her features, the gentle arch of her brow, her warm smile shattered by lines of sorrow and grief that time had etched into her skin. She was alive, but the shadows clung to her, weaving around her form like a veil of mist. "Mama!" I bellowed, my heart a wild stallion in my chest. I leapt forward, reaching out, but the shadows tightened their grip on my limbs, growing solid as they clawed at me with ragged fingers, stabbing through the fog of dread that hung about my shoulders. Around me, the whispers twisted and gnawed, feeding on my uncertainty. "The light is not what it seems," they hissed, sweet like honey but dripping with malice. "She'll take you back to her world, where the darkness reigns supreme forever. No. I screamed, shaking my head violently. "I won't go back," my response shattered the dynamic. The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned by the pulse of my conviction, but then they rallied. The ground quaked again as tendrils of darkness wrapped around my waist and legs, binding me tighter. I could feel the seething energy of the other souls, yearning, aching for me. Their spectral faces hovered just beyond the threshold of the door, mouths moving in relentless pleas, forming an unholy choir. "Don't you see the truth?" My mother's voice now came wreathed in urgency, her outstretched hand trembling with every faint flicker of light that surrounded her. "You can save us all." Images of childhood flicked in my mind, laughter under a summer sun, ice cream dripping down my palm, bedtime stories with her comforting voice weaving tales of bravery and dreams. The image flickered against the sinister undertones of the shadows, and I began to back away from both the light and the dark. Suddenly, the room trembled again, more violently than before, as a distorted face emerged from the shadows, a brutal amalgamation of the features I had once known. This was not a neighbor, not a family member, it was a mortuary of the Patan old friend, their visage splintered with regret and decay. "Toby? Is it really you?" The name slipped from my lips, but uncertainty gnawed at my heart. The essence of the person struggled against the heaving brutality of the shadows that encased them. "Help us. You're our only hope," the voice cried, filled with anguish. The shadows tightened their grip, actually dragging me toward the malevolent. Their deep hunger engulfed me, rendering my dreams of escape hazy and far away. Panic surged through me, but I didn't scream. I wouldn't let them take me again. "You've set us free. You must take a side." The cry echoed, and suddenly, I could see faces through the shadows, so many faces beseeching me to choose. Yet, the instincts that drove me to fight against the darkness urged me to shred their illusions. No. "You won't drag me down," I shouted, every ounce of willpower focusing on breaking free. With a final, desperate tug, I wrenched my body backward and burst through the coils of shadows, falling toward the light of my mother, whose outstretched hand lingered like a beacon of hope. But just as I anticipated her touch, the ground cracked beneath me, fissures of darkness snapping like 1,000 hungry mouths ready to devour their next meal. I fell to my knees, the light yanking at my heartstring, but the pull of the shadows felt invincible. An anguished howl erupted around me, rising like a tide. Traumatized faces melded into a tapestry of despair as I felt the shadows retreat, coiling back with trepidation, their unquenched hunger reaching for the light but held at bay by my moment of defiance. But it wouldn't last. The room began to dissolve, melting into a maelstrom of screams and wails that ruptured the air. In that chaos, I glimpsed the fading figure of my mother, her features warping back into the shadows that sprung forth from the ground. "You must decide before it's too late." Just as her voice strained against the abyss, the world collapsed into a shroud of darkness, and in those final moments, fleeing the shadows, I suddenly felt the sickening ease of forgetting, a longing to remain inside the black, a promise of endless oblivion. And then, just as the last remnants of light dissolved behind me, the unthinkable happened. I turned to see not one, but two figures emerging from the depths, their faces twisted and familiar like my own. "Join us," they whispered in perfect harmony, and the shadows surged once more, consuming me anew. The air was thick with an oppressive weight, pressing down on me like the heavy fog settling over the ocean just before a storm. Darkness surrounded me, but unlike before, it felt sentient, as though it breathed and pulsed with a heartbeat of its own, heartbeat, synchronized but twisted. As I struggled to stand amidst the thickening blackness, the two figures loomed large in my vision, their familiar features now grotesque puppets desiring to drag me into their realm of anguish. They were me, yet not, reflections of my deepest fears and insecurities, double shadows birthed from the depths of despair. Why fight it? One of them crooned, her smile too wide, stretching across a face that bore the signs of joy mixed with sorrow, an unsettling embrace of both. We're tired of waiting, tired of this dance. Embrace the truth of who you are. The other figure mirrored her, eyes glinting with insidious delight. You were always meant for this. Let go. You know the way. You can save everyone but not without us. The implication seared through my mind, and a chilling realization struck me. They were not just shadows seeking to reclaim their own, they were the fractured pieces of my soul, lost among the remnants of my past. Bile crept up my throat as their words wormed into my consciousness, unearthing the darkest corners I had fought so hard to suppress. Oh. I screamed, but the cry resonated weakly against the engulfing dark. You're not real. And yet, even as I declared it, doubt clawed at me, threatening to unravel the thin thread of my sanity. Reality is but a haze, the first shadow taunted, her laughter echoing like the jingling of a bell that chimed with malevolence. You are so close to seeing it. Just open your heart to us, tell us what you want around us. The shadows began to churn violently. Twisting faces became a chorus, souls wailing out in unison. What do you seek, little one? Is it liberation or destruction? Select your salvation. Each whisper wrapped around me, entwining like vines. Some carried echoes of childhood laughter, while others convulsed with sorrow. Tears stung my eyes as the cacophony of voices morphed into nightmares of my own creation, ones I had buried deep within. The air thickened, my movements felt sluggish, as though the shadows were dragging me back toward the chasm of despair I had just escaped. Don't listen to them. My voice quaked, breaking through the din. I won't be like you. I refuse. The moment I asserted my response, the ground shook violently beneath my feet, rending open once again the fissures of darkness that had already nearly devoured me. The laughter morphed into shrieks of outrage and agony, stretching my resolve to its very limits. The world was unraveling around me, and my heart raced, torn between the lurking despair and the warmth of the fleeting light that shimmered beyond the dining shadows. Each step felt like a war fought within a battlefield of guilt and hope. You have the power. Echoed from the shadows. Truly, you do. But freedom has a price. Will you pay it? A whirlwind of memories surged through me, images of lost friends and family members flashing vividly, their spectral faces urging and pleading. The environment began to pulsate with darkness that hungered for every crack in my will. A feeling of despair ripped through me like jagged glass. I pressed forward, desperate to escape, yet the shadows rippled and thickened, shifting with every flicker of my resolve. Choose. The shadows boomed, their myriad voices blending into a terrifying symphony. They clawed at my mind, churning thoughts into chaos as they whispered promises of safety wrapped in lies. In that moment of impending collapse, I saw her once again, me mother, just as she had been, but her form grew weaker, a tattered remnant of the radiant light I remembered. Help me, honey. Find me. I am still here. Let her go. I shouted into the dark, the scream echoing back, full of forgotten rage and pain. In response, the shadows recoiled, allowing a glimpse of light to pulse through the void, a fragile flicker ignited by sheer desperation. You want. Take her again. Just as I lunged for the struggling beam, a desperate hand stretched toward the fading light. The duo of shadows twisted like smoke and merged into one dark mass, their eyes burning like twin coffins ready to swallow me whole. You'll regret this choice. The darkness hungers and we are your true family. With a roar that shook the very foundation of the haunted realm, I thrust my hand toward the fading light, ready to escape the horrors bound within. But as my fingers grazed against the surface, a searing pain shot through me, wrenching my heart with a grip so powerful it felt like a vice. And then, as the fleeting light dissolved around me, the shadows surged forth, their whispers a chaotic storm, tearing through my mind. You could have saved them. Now, you belong with us forever. Everything went dark. And then I felt a coldness wrapping around my heart as something inhuman took a breath beside me, a presence that throbbed with a wrathful hunger for what I had denied. You made your choice, little one, it hissed low, and with a dread that churned in my gut, I turned to see the shadow morphing into an avatar of my biggest fear, that I was trapped, and the realization pierced deeper than I could have ever imagined. Not an escape, but another beginning as the presence loomed closer and closer, lips curling into the visage of my mother as her voice echoed, hauntingly sweet, "Join us forever." The air vibrated with an unholy energy, the darkness swirling like a living entity around me. I froze, dread clawing at my insides as the chilling likeness of my mother consumed the void, her smile both radiant and terrifying. Each heartbeat thudded against my ribs, a drumroll heralding my own demise. "Mother?" I whispered, the memory of her laughter wrapped in warmth now twisted into something sinister. My heart raced as I searched her eyes, desperately clinging to the hope that the mother I had lost was still somewhere deep within her flesh. But the emptiness behind those eyes spoke volumes of the horror I had unleashed. "It's me. It's your son, what you seek cannot be given freely," the shadowy form cooed, the melody of her voice dipping into a whisper that slid through the cracks of my resolve. "You must realize the truth that you are but a vessel of both grief and power. Embrace your roots. Join the eternal dance of despair." That I fought against the dark tendrils wrapping around my limbs, struggling to breathe as they squeezed the very essence of my identity away, but deep within, a flicker of defiance ignited. "You're not her. You're nothing but a wretched echo," I barked, thrusting my hands forward as if to ward off the encroaching darkness, but it had latched onto me, dragging me toward its gaping maw, eager to devour all that I was. I could hear the tepid echoes of laughter that sent shivers down my spine, a sickening symphony of past failures and repressed memories. Behind the shadows, I glimpsed fleeting visions, my childhood home, steeped in shadows, crumbling under the weight of time, while echoes of my mother's sweet words twisted into horrific taunts. "Save us," they whispered from the ether, their voices layered with sorrowful cries that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. I was anchored, my feet embedded in the darkness as their pleas wrapped around me, tender yet violent, a paradox of affection and contempt. "Enough!" I shouted, rage flooding my veins like molten lava. With a primal scream, I clawed at the air, feeling the grip of the despair tighten. "You are not my family. I refuse to accept this." The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned by my defiance. The flicker of my mother's visage faltered, and for an instant, her true form peered through, fragile and frightened. "Help me. You must break free." Those words pierced through the haze, igniting a desperate instinct within me. I needed to escape this grotesque parody of my life, but how? The shadows whispered promises of unending sorrow and power, forcing me to grapple with the possibility I dreaded most, the choice of acceptance. A wave of darkness surged, its inky tendrils twisting, wrapping around my heart like iron shackles. I felt the embodiment of every word I had ever spoken to loved ones, every goodbye left unspoken. A pressure mounted in my chest as I grappled with the weight of my choice. I was a prisoner to despair, forced to confront the harrowing truth of my existence. Then the darkness split, revealing a sliver of light on the opposite side of the abyss. Glowing like a distant star, it urged me forward, shimmering with promise, a beacon of hope. But around it, the shadows coiled savagely, determined to stomp out the fragile luminosity. "Do not be foolish," they snarled in unison, their voices a symphony of malice. "You cannot fight what you have become. You are ours." Ignoring their taunts, I extended my hand toward the light, feeling warmth seep through the cold void. A surge of energy gripped me, empowering me to push against the restraints clawing at my heart. The flicker grew, illuminating the despair within, casting the flickering shadows into paleness. As I drew closer, the pulsating light blossomed into a visage of my mother, radiant and ethereal, but this wasn't the twisted mimicry I had seen moments before. In its gaze, I saw unyielding love. "Come, my child. Embrace the truth, not the pain. I'm still here, I never left." The shadows recoiled, shrieking as they fought to maintain their grasp on me, but their hold weakened, the grotesque echoes of my past fading with every inch I moved toward the radiant figure. I felt the chains of resentment and sorrow snapping, each fracture releasing anguished cries from the shadows. Then, abruptly, I froze, a deafening blast of darkness erupting from the depths, rippling through everything as it retaliated. I stared in horror as the pulsating darkness surged toward me, an avalanche of despair that threatened to engulf the last remnants of light. In that moment, a dreadful stillness enveloped the space, as though time itself had halted, holding its breath. Choose quickly. The shadows hissed, their voice a lover's whisper turned sour. The light cannot hold. You must make a decision. With my mother's gaze on me, her silent scream echoing in my heart, I slammed my eyes shut, summoning every ounce of strength I had. The engulfing void around me dissolved into fragments of memories and shattered promises, a whirlwind of grief mixed with desperate resolve. And then I did the unthinkable. I embraced the darkness, letting it wash over me. But I wasn't prepared for the truth it revealed. As I opened my eyes, a cacophony of wails echoed through the shadows, my own voice blending in the symphony of anguish. Welcome to despair, the shadows crooned, and in that moment, I sank beyond the veil of light, crumpling into oblivion as the reality of my fate unfurled before me, a chilling revelation that would render my quest for salvation futile. Before everything faded to black, a lingering word echoed in my mind: you've unlocked the secrets, but the horror begins anew. The silence was suffocating, as if the world outside had retreated into a cavernous void along with me. The darkness enveloped my senses, heavy like an unyielding shroud. Instinctively, I reached out, the air thick and oppressive, my fingers grazing against a slick, cold surface. I recoiled, heart racing, the touch igniting a primal fear buried deep within. That's when I heard a low hum, reverberating through the void, vibrating in my bones. It twisted and turned, a sinister lullaby vibrating through the fabric of silence, and I felt it beckoning, coaxing me into its depths. Join us, the shadows whispered, their voices dripping with honeyed malice. You belong here. No, I croaked, shaking my head violently, trying to disperse the seductive call. I won't succumb. But the words felt hollow in the all-consuming blackness, each syllable swallowed almost instantly by the chill that surrounded me. With a desperate surge of defiance, I pushed against the unseen barrier, the memories of my mother's love flashing before my eyes, her warm touch, the laughter we once shared. I clung to these remnants as though they were lifelines. But they were fading, slipping through my fingers like sand, challenged by the suffocating wave of despair that pressed in. Suddenly, the shadows trembled, quaking violently, and I felt a searing heat break through the chill, as if the very essence of my anguish was being peeled back. The edges of my vision flickered with indistinct forms, rising up, writhing in the shroud with grotesque vigor. Wisps of figures began to materialize, each embodying the remains of torment, a woman with hollow eyes weeping tears of coal, a child who reached out yet never touched anything, their features twisted in perpetual anguish. Your mother cannot save you, the figures murmured, their voices a discordant symphony. She has traded her love for power, bound to the depths that you now tread. Join us, and you shall see the truth of her longing and yours. No. I shouted, but my voice faltered as fear gripped my heart. I stepped back instinctively, but the darkness conspired, yanking me deeper still. The wailing around me crescendoed, turning into a tempest, a storm of anguish swirling relentlessly. Each scream resonated with my pulse, a reminder of every moment I pursued this unspeakable truth. I was shackled not just by despair but by guilt. The thought of abandoning my mother to this hell reared its ugly head. As I faltered, the figures coalescing in the dark erupted into hideous laughter, mocking my internal struggle. The air itself thickened, twisting around me like serpentine coils, suffocating and suffused with dread. They lunged closer, their chilling whispers intertwining with my thoughts. Accept your fate. It was always yours to embrace, they taunted, their breath stinging with the pungent odor of decay. Power lies in the darkness, in the acceptance of what it means to be broken. The swirl intensified, dragging me under, yet a fierce light flickered deep within me, battling against the engulfing shadows, a spark of defiance igniting against the weight of despair. I clung to it, forcing back against the tides of malevolence. Tell me. I bellowed into the void, why can't I leave? Why must I face this horror? But the swirling vortex of misery only laughed, a cacophonous chorus seeping into the crevices of my mind. Because you are us, they hissed in unison, their forms melding, morphing into reflections of my deepest fears, the memory of my mother's radiant smile masking her torment beneath a beautiful facade, a living testament to the scars of our past. At that moment, the world around me flickered, and something within the darkness shifted, a presence far colder than the shadows at my back. I wheeled around, dread settling heavy in my gut, to find a figure emerging from the depths. It was a version of myself. A twisted mirror image, gaunt and hollowed, eyes teeming with void and malice, glimmering under an unholy light. Its lip curled into a serpent's grin, an omen of what I could become, what I might already be. Douc? It purred, voice echoing like thunder through the agony. The mirrors of despair shatter to reveal your truest self. We are one, and the darkness within you is your greatest power. No. I gasped, the horror crashing down around me. I refused to accept this, and in the stark moment of my resistance, a piercing shriek erupted from my own lips, raw and unfiltered, merging into the cacophony around me. The shadows convulsed, wrapping tighter around me, almost feeding off my despair, but still, I fought. As I pushed against the tide with everything I had, I felt the world shift, the darkness quaking, then the ground tore open beneath me, a gaping maw uncurling into a bottomless pit. I wasn't falling, I was being consumed. In that brief moment of free fall, I glimpsed fleeting images beyond the edge of light, horrific memories of lost souls, their shapes swirling, clawing for escape amid a tumult of anguish. One silhouette caught my eye. It was my mother, her features marred by shadows, her frozen scream an echo reverberating through my mind, shattering the last strands of hope. Come home, she implored, her voice a soft, haunting resonance that froze me in place as darkness pulled me further toward my ultimate doom. But just as I was about to vanish into the abyss, a new voice rose, sharp and terrifying, cutting through the crowd of shadows like a knife. Help him! It cried, desperate and wild, shattering the bonds as I fell deeper. I twisted around, searching for the source. Before I plunged completely into the depths, a face emerged from the seething void, a face that was all too familiar. A figure from my past, twisted in agony, reaching out for me with trembling fingers. Follow me, it whispered, and the darkness split, revealing two paths, one leading back to the grasp of despair, the other surging with the promise of hope. And that's when I faced the ultimate choice. The swirl of despair hovered palpably around me. I was suspended between the eternal chasm of hopelessness and the breath of salvation, leaving me gasping, heart hammering in my chest like a trapped bird. The voice of the figure beckoned, tinged with both familiarity and fear. Follow me, it urged. With every fiber of my being, I wanted to reach out for the glimmer of hope it promised, but unease slithered through my veins. The face belonged to someone I once loved, someone who vanished from my life like mist evaporating in the sun, a friend lost to the same darkness that now tormented me. Why should I trust you? I shouted into the oppressive void, the walls of darkness vibrating around us, listening intently. You're part of this nightmare, just like them. The figure, its features obscured by anguish, took a step forward, shadows recoiling from its presence. I know the truth. I know what it means to be ensnared by fear. But there is a chance to break free. You need to see what lies beyond. It felt as though time stretched impossibly thin as my heart waged war with my mind. Every instinct screamed for me to turn away, but that flicker of hope shone brighter against the encroaching darkness, calling me, wrapping its promise around my soul. I hesitated only a moment, then lunged toward the voice, propelled by desperation. The darkness erupted with a cacophony of rage, the figures of anguish reaching out, their voices rising in a horrid crescendo. Fool! They shrieked, their laughter mingling with the torment swirling around me. You cannot escape what you truly are, but I wasn't listening, I couldn't. The figure before me was slowly morphing, channeling a radiance that illuminated the suffocating blackness. With every step towards it, the shadows recoiled, hissing and spitting venomously. As I reached out my trembling hand, the moment felt suspended into me, a fragile bridge between two worlds. I grasped its hand, and a searing heat surged through me, pulling me toward a reality that shimmered just out of reach. In that instant, a horrifying wail pierced the air, a cacophonous sound that resonated with every fear buried deep within me. I turned, veins freezing as I saw them, the shadows, no longer twisted, but wearing the faces of those I had lost. They surged toward me, a grotesque parade of familiar specters, each one reflecting the pain of my memories. Join us. Join us. They howled, their fingers outstretched, the screams drowning out reason. You cannot escape the truth of your heritage. You are destined to bear this misery. The anguish in their cries wrapped around my soul, squeezing tighter than any serpent's hold. No! I screamed, wrenching my gaze back to my guide, whose own face shimmered with urgency and intent. Help me. Please, look beyond. It commanded, forcing my attention past the familiar faces twisting in torment. Beyond the shadows, a pinprick of light began to pulse, a beacon cutting through the mass of despair like a blade separating flesh from bone, but as I gazed into the radiant glimmer, its warmth beckoning sweetly, I was struck cold by an aching realization. The light was shifting, encapsulating something sinister within. The shadows of my past increasingly dreaded swirling around me, whispering the chilling truth: your salvation is a deception. A voice roared, echoing from the depths the very essence of my fears embodied in that powerful statement. A serpent coiling around its prey, it threatened to pull me back into the depths of the torment I sought to escape. Suddenly, my guide's face twisted with sorrow. You must make your choice. It shouted over the din, but the shadows began to converge, threatening to drag me back into their clutches. The ground beneath us shuddered violently, fissures opening like gaping maws eager to consume me whole. The faces of the lost rose and fell with the earth, their cries escalating into a chilling symphony of despair. Choose. The command rang through my mind like a bell tolling doom. The radiant light flickered incandescently, revealing fleeting images of joy and pain intertwined, memories long buried that threatened to uproot everything I thought I understood. I found myself at the precipice, heart racing, grappling with the gravity of my decision. Before I could even consider, waves of shadow surged toward me, dousing the flickering light, leaving only an oppressive darkness that clamored for my attention. In that wicked moment, terror clamped down, and I felt the realm of possibility fracturing, the weight of despair sharpening into something sharper than fear itself. Working against the storm of voices, I shouted out, I choose to break the curse. But as the words left my mouth, the shadows began to retreat, and the radiant light flared violently, revealing a heart-stopping truth. Then you should never have come here, echoed my twisted reflection, emerging behind me, a grotesque grin spreading, and in its horrific visage, I saw not just my future, but my past, unspooling like rotten yarn. As the world around us buckled into chaos, the wailing crescendo echoed through the darkness as the ground beneath me threatened to shatter completely. And then I realized, with dawning horror, not only had I opened the door to my past, but I had also unlocked a far greater horror, one tethered not only to myself but something older and far more sinister than I could fathom. In the distance, a scratching sound began to emerge, like nails clawing against wood, echoing through the void, a heartbeat of fury, a remnant of a curse long forgotten, now awakened. The shadows whispered, your choice will bring it home. I turned back towards the figure, panic rising as an infernal howl erupted, morphing into something monstrous, something beyond the known horrors around me, and I understood with gut-wrenching terror that I was not the only one making a choice tonight. From the depths, an abyssal eye opened, vast and consuming, locking onto me, and I knew whatever dwelled within was hungry. And as the shadows converged upon my fractured form, I realized I was not merely a pawn in this game, I was the key, and their victory was only just beginning. I was in a void, a maelstrom of pure darkness, vibrant yet suffocating, where the air tasted of iron and despair. Each breath felt like a betrayal, laced with the hope I held while grappling with the shadows beckoning me close. I felt like a puppet caught in the grand machinations of forces far too immense to fathom. That eerie scraping sound resumed, a primordial nail on the surface of sanity, corroding my resolve while the shadows whispered sweet nothings of my deepest regrets and unfulfilled dreams. Then, inexplicably, a light flickered in the distance. It was not warm, it seemed to pulse with an unnatural life of its own, flickering like a dying star. My body moved of its own accord. I was propelled forward, somehow compelled to reach for that light, that unfathomable promise of escape. The figures of lost souls surrounded me, their eyes glowing with a treacherous hope, reaching out in agonized yearning. "Follow the light!" they cried, their voices intertwining into a haunting chorus. "It will save us all." I hesitated. Their words twisted inside me like a blade. The truth gnawed at my consciousness. This wasn't just about my freedom, it was about theirs too. These fragments of lives intertwined with mine, known and unknown, were all drawn to the light that now eclipsed the shadows. The clarity was devastating. I was their anchor, yet their savior. No. I screamed, feeling the weight of their expectations as the cries grew more frantic. "You can't compel me. This is not my burden." But the shadows tightened their grip, forming a cocoon that threatened to pull me into their abyss. I fought against that pull, trembling at what lay beyond. Yet my eyes found the light. It glowed with an intensity that paralyzed my thoughts. The figure I had seen earlier emerged once more, a twisted reflection of myself cloaked in shadows and sorrow. "You're stronger than them," it whispered, a voice both alluring and malevolent. "You know the truth within you. The light holds what you seek. Embrace it, release them." In that moment, the shadows recoiled, peeling back like a thick veil to reveal scattered memories, some of joy intertwined with despair. I could see my mother's face, painted with a sorrow I had yet to comprehend, holding back tears. "Help me find peace," she mouthed in desperation. "You must confront the darkness." The swirling chaos around me shifted, a vortex of colors erupting as the weight of the world pressed heavily on my chest. I could feel the darkness surrounding me, collective agony of countless souls, all trapped within a realm that thrived on despair and pain. I understood now. They fed on fear and anguish, and I had accidentally become their gateway. But as the deathly howl rose in the distance, an overwhelming wave of dread crashed upon me, unearthing a truth far more harrowing than any shadow. I was not merely the key, I was the architect of this horror. I had unlocked the door to my own confinement, and in turn, I had unleashed their wretched cries into the world. That I turned to face the blinding light once more, my heart racing, glowing with an urgency as sharp as a knife. The choice lay bare before me. To free myself was to contain that darkness forever, to embrace it, to step into the light, was to risk my soul merging with something horrific beyond comprehension. I felt the shadows shift behind me, eager and hungry, but this time, I resolved to reclaim my fate. "Stop!" I screamed, a primal roar laced with desperation that rang through the confined space. "I will not bow to this darkness. You will not wring the last shreds of hope from me." As those words spilled forth from my mouth, I felt a gravitation form within my chest, a hurricane of conflict imploding. The light pulsing before me seemed to respond, echoing my defiance like some primordial force awakened, but the shadows lunged forth, gathering their dark forms and blending into a monstrous maw of chaos. "Your choice will condemn you. You cannot forsake them." In that overwhelming moment, I realized the truth I had unwittingly unleashed. I was their progenitor. The darkness root lay buried deeply within me, stretching its tendrils into the very fabric of my being. The light flickered, threatening to extinguish, and right there I felt an insidious pulse through the darkness, a terrifying reminder of who I was. As ghosts of regret flooded my mind, I sought the warmth of the light again, clutching onto the glimmers of love and loss, weaving the tapestry of my existence tighter. I took a breath, filling my lungs with the weight of my sacrifices, the love I once knew but had feared to reconnect with all along. And then I felt a surge of power overwhelming the darkness like a tidal wave breaking against weakened shores. I charged towards the light, arms stretched wide, surrendering to it completely. "Embrace me!" I thundered as I flung myself towards that searing luminosity. I plunged headfirst into the brilliance, ripping through the veil that bound me, the shadows shrieking in horrid rage as a blinding light erupted, flaring back at the haunting cries that had held me captive far too long. As the thunderous whirl stopped, I stood in a new space, bright and eternal. The ghosts I had seen transformed into brilliant lights swirling all around me, finally freed from the shackles of despair. Yet, just as I exhaled relief, a chilling realization gripped my heart. A dissonant laughter slithered through the air, thick and creeping dread snaking through my veins, and my reflection in the lights flickered back, smiling wickedly. In that final moment of understanding, I beheld the twisted version of myself lurking behind the veil of light and hope. "You think you've escaped?" it hissed, and just as its hand reached toward me, mimicking my movements, I understood this horror had been my own making. The shadows had always been intertwined with my essence, waiting for the next choice I would make. Evil had not been vanquished, it lingered within me, breathing and waiting, and then the last sentence seared into my mind like a brand: "You faced the dark, but now the dance begins."